everywhere. My name is Herb Rosenblatt. I'm the National Executive Director of the Jewish War Veterans of the USA and the President of the Military Coalition. Military Coalition, this is our press conference. We are 33 organizations, military and veterans organizations. We represent active duty, retired, veterans, dependents, and survivors. Military Coalition chairmen are represented by Colonel Bob Norton of the Military Officers Association, who's representing our two chairmen, Mike Hayden and Joe Barr. Behind me, ladies and gentlemen, are representatives from the Military Coalition. They have my back, unlike the administration in Congress, which doesn't have my back. As we stand here, the government is shut down, military readiness is eroding, veterans fear they will not, disabled veterans fear they will not be getting checks, dependents and survivors have that worry. That shouldn't be. You're going to hear from our expert personnel about the military shutdown, about its effects, and we call on the administration and Congress to end the shutdown. Our veterans serve this country. We need the country to serve our veterans, our military personnel, their dependents, and their survivors. I thank you, one and all, for being with us. I thank my colleagues in the coalition for the great work they do, and I will be followed now by Morgan Brown from the Air Force Sergeants Association.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. With the government shut down, the uniformed services cannot fully maintain the upkeep and training that our military readiness relies upon. Many of the services that support our men and women in uniform remain closed. This profoundly affects the country's military readiness. In addition, not everyone that wears the uniform in service to their country is back at work. That being the men and women serving in the NOAA Commissioned Corps and the U.S. Public Health Service. Their pay remains in jeopardy. Even though the bulk of the military is still at work, funding for government equipment, materials, supplies, and other items that they need has not been appropriated. This lapse in appropriations diminishes the effectiveness of our forces at a critical time while our nation remains at war. Yes, we are still at war. Speaking of that, emergency funding that supports commanders on the ground and intelligence activities also remains unavailable, and service leaders report that they're further curtailing training for later deploying units, an activity that had already been reduced thanks to sequestration spending cuts. Service members transferring to and from overseas speak of problems with housing allowances not being started and dislocation, temporary lodging allowances not being paid. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that military tuition assistance programs have been suspended, and with a continued shutdown and the likelihood that post 9/11 GI Bill payments would also be suspended, that poses a problem for our folks that are serving in uniform. At the end of the day, the most important asset are our people, and the shutdown has raised significant morale concerns within the military as the force does its best to operate despite the additional stressors. This has commanders and service members alike very worried. Again, I stress with each passing day of the shutdown, the readiness of our fighting force becomes more at risk. And those serving our nation deserve better than this. Our message to the nation's leaders today is simple. It's time to end the shutdown. Now here is Major General Andrew Davis, the board member of the Military Coalition and executive director of the Reserve Officers Association, to speak to you on how the shutdown is affecting the reserve components. Thank you.
Good morning. As Morgan said, I'm Major General Drew Davis, retired Marine Corps, and Executive Director of the Reserve Officers Association of the United States. Despite the Reserve and Guard making up nearly half of the U.S. Defense Force, that's 1.1 million servicemen and women, Reserve component training has been canceled, and unwisely canceled. Congress has overlooked the need to pay these citizen soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen for their inactive drill training, weekend drill training. And the Pentagon has made a policy decision that excludes them from active service even when Pay Our Military Act authorizes active duty orders. I won't suggest the Pentagon's motivation for this. The policy they published is out of date with the law and out of date with the realities of our nation's defense needs. Frustration grows among the reserve component population as they are unable to fulfill their mission. In the last 12 years, the Reserve and Guard has been mobilized more than 883,000 times, and 330,000 of them more than once. These men and women also responded to help their fellow citizens during natural and ecological disasters such as hurricanes, flooding, and oil spills. Today, nearly 50,000 Reserve and Guardsmen are activated, taking the same risks as active duty service members. Yet, after returning from war or disaster, they see that they are again being overlooked, making them feel that they are second-class warriors. This federal government shutdown proves to them that they are actually right, as it is unlikely that they will be able to make up lost training time and income, unlike the furloughed civilian employees who likely will get retro pay. Our military readiness is being impaired because reserve readiness is a perishable commodity. And 1.1 million people in the reserve force are offended at how they're being treated. Not to be overlooked is the rest of the uniformed services, Public Health Service, and the NOAA Corps that was totally left out of the Pay Our Military Act. These groups sent individuals into war zones as well and were totally forgotten. It's time to end the government shutdown now. I would now like to introduce Kathleen Moakler of the National Military Families Association.
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Moakler, Government Relations Director for the National Military Family Association and a proud military family member. Military families have shown their courage and resilience through the past decade of war and in past conflicts. It is harder for them to show the same strength and resilience when faced with the uncertainties caused by the government shutdown. While we are for the quick action on the Pay Our Military Act, the overall security of our nation cannot be addressed in a piecemeal fashion. Last week, we had the families of the fallen relying on donations from gracious charities to bury their dead until appropriate legislation was passed. Today, military families and survivors still face uncertainty and financial difficulties. Survivors don't know if they will receive their DIC payments at the end of the month. Families who have used the GI Bill to pay for the education of their children don't know if they will be able to pay tuition for the rest of the semester. The absence of a defense appropriations bill, along with budget cuts and sequestration, poses a threat to the long-term readiness of service members and families, as training has been curtailed, moves have been postponed or canceled, and important contracts cannot be executed. Military families, like other American families, rely on other programs and services provided by the federal government. The shutdown of the WIC program will affect many young military families who rely on this assistance. Public schools, educating large numbers of military children, face the loss of much-needed impact aid funds if the shutdown continues. Service members continue to deploy and fight on behalf of our nation. They and their families need to know that the programs and services they rely on will be available to ensure that readiness. We need a permanent fix, not the temporary band-aid of budget deals or to face this again in a few months. The National Military Family Association, along with the Military Coalition, ask you to pass the appropriation bills and the government shutdown and show military families and survivors that they continue to have the nation's support. I am pleased to introduce our next speaker, Steve Gonzalez from the American Legion.
Apparently closing a few bases is not an option.
Good morning, everyone.